I'd like us to start now and to say hi, everybody, and welcome to our annual summer symposia. Well, unfortunately, without drinks, with alumni of the AA schools, MSc and MArch in Sustainable Environmental Design. 13 alumni from the last 10 years will be joining us this year to trace their journey after graduation from the program and reflect on the present and future of environmental design in architecture. We have 3 symposia this year, like last year, over 3 weeks in June, starting today and continuing next week and the week after. Today's alumni, CHANASIT, CHOLASUKE, who graduated from MArch in 2010, so over 10 years ago, still looking quite young. Jonathan NATANIAN graduated from the MSc in 2013. Dr. NATANIAN, Professor Dr. NATANIAN, and SHRAVAN PRADEEP, who graduated from the MArch in 2014. So, CHANASIT, you?
Yes. Yes.
Jonathan and SHRAVAN, welcome. I'm so pleased to see you. It's been far too long. So, well, what did you do after graduation, and where are you now? So we'll start with CHANASIT and follow Jonathan, and then finish with SHRAVAN.
Okay. Okay. So let me share the screen, all right? Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone, and good morning, good evening from Bangkok. Sorry. And thank you, CMOS, for inviting me today. It's my pleasure to participate in this event to share about my experience after graduate from SED. And again, my name is CHANASIT CHOLASUKE from Studio Architects based in Bangkok, Thailand. And my friend called me Deuce. And what led me to the Sustainable Environmental Design program at AA is my idea that architecture should not only be limited to function and aesthetic, but to create value and benefit for people, society, and environment. So during my study, I was interested in people comfort condition and quality of life in the passive mean, as well as the knowledge from vernacular architecture. So my dissertation is about the low-income community in Bangkok. And through the design process, I have learned the traditional Thai house, the climate condition of Thailand, and the suitable passive design strategies, as well as the analyzing tools, which allow us to understand our design building performance. Essentially, I have learned the meaning of sustainable design and ways to apply this strategy to various conditions. And after I graduated from AA in 2010, I came back to Thailand to set up my own office called Studios Architects with my friend who graduated from MIT Urban Design. And the meaning of Studios Architects came from the name of the 2 partners. And we also believe that collaboration and brainstorming, like the way we work in studio among friends and professors, will encourage our imagination to create good architecture. And if you visit our website, you will see that our aim is to merge the idea of urban and environmental design into our architecture. And right now we have about 17 people in our team. And our office is an open plan in order to encourage teamwork and provide flexibility for the employees for the highest level of productivity. And at that time, the idea of sustainability in Thailand is still not that widespread. A lot of people may have heard it as a buzzword, but they didn't really understand enough and wasn't willing to invest in sustainable architecture. So they rarely invest in environmental consultant or in environmentally friendly materials. except for a small number of projects that are specifically aiming for the LEED certificate. So we had to absorb and manage the expense and man-hour, as there wasn't enough flexibility from the client side to compensate both the duration and professional fee of the design. And within these conditions, we try our best to propose environmental passive design strategy for every project we have done, while still maintain both the function and aesthetic for architecture. And this became the main approach for our design that distinguish our project from every other firms in Thailand. And our design philosophy is to use architecture as a medium to connect between people and environment, accentuating its identity through architecture and space that enhance user comfort, as well as benefiting society and environment. So the first project I want to show you today is called Sonic Vision, which was our office first project. It's a 2,000 square meter and 5-story office building. And by the time I was back to Thailand, the project massing and function has already been developed. So I stepped in to help with the front facade, which needs both aesthetic and thermal control as its face waste. So we proposed a double skin system with ventilation to reduce heat gain and at the same time provide aesthetic through glasses with various opacity. And it also responds to the function inside and create patterns which relate back to our concept of sound frequency. And here is the lobby area on the ground floor that sit beside the green space here, and the office building, main office space on the 4th floor, which had been opened up for natural light and ventilation. And this image is the pocket courtyard that connect with the main meeting room. So then the next project is Konapa, which means in the forest in Thai. It is a mixed-use project that reminds me of Simos was saying that sometimes our own feeling tell us about the environment more than the simulation itself. And during the design process, we were lucky to have known the owner of the project and were able to visit the site almost every week, allow us to deeply understand the site condition and environment. And this project locates near Phrakanong BTS train station. So the foot traffic here is quite high because people normally use this street as a shortcut to BTS. And the existing trees provide cooling shade for this street, which is usually very hard to find in Bangkok. However, the fence are in the way and refrain people to have access to this green area. So we wanted to preserve this hard to find green area in the city while making it more accessible. So we came up with the idea to merge architecture into nature and emphasize the uniqueness of the atmosphere that nature provides. We started by surveying the existing tree in order to find the best location to place our building. As you can see, most of the existing trees are in the middle of the site. The complex is therefore divided into 2 parts, with the advice from the arborist that higher building may block the sunlight to the pink trumpet tree here. Building A was then designed as a horizontal building, while building B is a vertical building. And in the middle, we create a floating exhibition space that is connected to bridges, stair, and ramp. And as you can see, we try to open up the middle of the site, which has a lot of trees for the main entrance. The component of the main facade, which face the street, create a gradient pattern from the tree in the middle toward the urban context. And because of the good microclimate condition in the site, this side of the facade is the only concern we have on solar radiation. Therefore, we have decided to make it a double skin facade with opening to help ventilate and block the direct solar radiation for the interior space. And this is a top-down view from drone. You will see the group of the existing tree and the pink trumpet tree here. And once you enter to the project, architecture become less prominent and nature become the main focus. Because our concept is to emphasize the uniqueness of the atmosphere that nature provides, we decided to use reflective glass for the facade that face the grove of trees. This creates a disappearing effect on the edge of the architecture and highlight the tree as a main focus. And on the other hand, we are still able to see out to the nature once we are inside the space. Every architectural element within the project are designed to work around the tree, including this stair, which we intended for the user to feel as if they are floating and walking over the tree. And working inside these spaces would feel as if you are surrounded by nature, and every unit are designed for adaptive opportunity to access natural ventilation. And what we are most proud of and consider as our success in this project is the fact that we use architecture as a medium to connect people and nature. And we also use passive design strategy in providing comfort conditions to the user and preserving the green area in Bangkok. Then the next project is a small house with 350 square meters. The owner is a friend of mine who is a landscape designer and a photographer. So we wanted to make this house more like his photographing studio, where we play around with the aperture, perception, light, and shadow within each space. The surrounding of the house isn't really in a good condition with rundown houses and informal settlement, as you can see here. We found it best to create a new view within the house itself that could be controlled. We then subtract certain parts of the massing in order to create internal green area. And our strategy in puncturing the opening can be categorized into two ideas. The bigger opening are used to frame the view, while the smaller one help with ventilation. Other details such as turtling the edge will help with privacy and create interesting light and shadow inside the house. And the exterior wall consists of two concrete layers with insulation in the middle to help reduce the heat. We also use wood louver which can be opened and closed wherever necessary in order to help block the sun and make the house feel homier and with the warmer tone from the wood. And this taper detail of the opening would help with privacy from the surrounding as well. And here is how the floating wall on the left acts as both the conceptual mass completion and the shading device for the two-story high living space here. And this is a double volume of the main living space that I mentioned earlier, which has a large opening that frame one point of view toward green area in the back and also connect with the main inner courtyard. The transparency we see from the interior gave a strong contrast from the opaqueness from the exterior. And here is how light and shadow from the opening play out to create an interesting effect and change throughout the day. And this is the floating wall which help block the sun and frame the sky. This is one of the bigger opening framing a Thai house looking from the art studio on the fourth floor. And this is how the exterior look in the evening with light glow from the interior space. And the last project I want to present today is the office building. The project began when we were approached to design at the new headquarters for an agrochemical company by the name of Intercop. And as the company name suggests, Intercop main focus is on the development and production of agriculture-related products. So we wanted to rethink what a modern office building in the city can look like and how we can not only bring in this modern trend into a traditional office setting, but also bring the feeling of working on the ground and in nature to our vertical building typology. So for us, using rice terrace as an inspiration represent a way to reintroduce the traditional relationship between human work and nature, where all elements positively affect one another into modern offices. Ultimately, our goal is to design an office building that represents Intercorp and its relationship with Thailand agriculture, as well as create architectural space that has a positive impact on its occupant and the surrounding environment. And because this project is located in a rapid urban development area, it's become one of the first mid-life building among the existing residential home. And this condition led us to set up a challenge of how do we design a 5,000 square meter office building that is suitable to the surrounding context. One of our design solutions is to reduce the scale and perception of building physical massing to the shifting of individual form mass, which reflect back to our rice terrace concept. And through the integration of as much greenery as possible back into the architecture, we were able to contribute more green area back into the city, which reduced the impact of urban heat island. And the formal interpretation of the rice terrace is also reflected into the interior space to the shifting platform and orientation of each function, which the main staircase connecting them. And we propose these public functions as spaces that would encourage the office worker to be involved in a variety of activities and relaxation, such as fitness, cafeteria, yoga, and so on, which are all connected to the green terrace. And we try to integrate passive design strategy in order to create comfortable working space to the consideration of natural ventilation and adequate daylighting. Okay. And we also use the layer of green roof to act as an insulation and analyze solar radiation in order to design shading device for each orientation, which were designed to reduce heat without compromising the outlooking visual connection. We're using a taper design for the louver and reduce the thickness of the lower part of each louver to correspond with the occupant line of sight. And the overall thickness of the louver also correspond to the orientation it faces. The awning and upper louver of the north facade protect against high angle sunlight, while the thick louver are utilized in the south and east facade. As you can see from the shifting mass, that the shifting mass also provides self-shading to some part of the building. And on the west, here we also use the service call, such as toilet storage or main staircase to protect the interior space from the direct heat gain. And this is the main courtyard on the east that connect to the main lobby area. And here is the view from the main entrance. And we wanted to create an office that does not feel like an office, and architecture inspired by agriculture in the form of a tropical modern architecture that is both unique and relevant to the tropical climate of Thailand. We believe that the value of this project resides in our effort to create a better quality of life and working environment for the modern office occupant. And we were lucky enough to be awarded ever since our very first project, both locally and internationally. In our country, we received an award from the Association of Siamese Architects, which is the highest prize here in Thailand. And internationally, we have received the award from Architizer and Acacia. And also we have been chosen to compete in the World Architecture Festival in 2017 and 2019. 18, which has taught us a lot in terms of presenting against world-class architects. And this experience also gave us a chance to attend the presentation from many exceptional architects, such as Hedwig, Big, Nelly, and Hu, Friesen, and so on. And as well as many good lectures from Herzog and de Moulin, Charles James, or Len Kuha. And for us, these awards make us feel more confident in the value of our work. But what is most important is the unique experience and the knowledge we have received by participating in this award event to see how architecture or allow our life and how it is moving forward. And in 2019, we have been selected to be one of the keynote speakers in ASA Forum together with BIG, MVRDV, Foster and Partner and Affiliate him. And after the event, I was invited by Rafa Hussein to be a part of the jury member for Hussein Award 2020 Asia Pacific, which is a competition for sustainable design. And it was a great experience to have been able to listen and exchange ideas with other jury members who are very knowledgeable and experienced in sustainability, such as engineers and professors from Harvard, Mr. Chris Lee Hian Nontida from MIT or Nirmal from Singapore. And this experience gave us many new knowledges, especially on new technologies that we may not have been able to keep up with. And these are my 10 years experience after I graduated from SED. Finally, I would like to say that I'm very honored and proud to have learned from CMOS and other professors, as well as meeting all my classmates. It was a great experience, and the knowledge I have learned from SED is an important part of my career and my success. I'm hoping that in the future, I will be able to create my own sustainable department in my office and integrate more profound understanding about sustainability into my architecture. And thank you.
Thank you so much, CHANASIT. Thank you so much. Great projects, amazing projects.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I hope there will be opportunity to have a discussion, but let's continue now with the presentations. Jonathan, are you ready?
Yes, I am. I just need the ability to share.
Oh, you should have it. Okay, hold on, just in case.
Maybe now? Yes, yeah. Now I have it. Okay. So, where am I now? First of all, CHANASIT, I was very impressed by your presentation, and I'm overwhelmed by how different the things we're going to talk about, and diversity, I think, is the name of the game in the program. It's beautiful. So, hi everyone, I'm Jonathan, an Israeli architect, and now more a researcher. Graduated from the SED with MSc in 2013, and I'm reporting from Munich, Germany, where is now at last receiving some sun. We are receiving some sun, finally. I will briefly show what I was doing here and where I'm off to next, and I'm very happy and excited to be here. So thank you very much, Simos, for the invitation. Following a very short intro of myself and my research context, I will dive into my PhD research, which revolves around the correlation between urban form and environmental performance. I'll then show some other ongoing and future perspectives. So just as a very brief introduction of myself, my career timeline to date moved restlessly between theory and practice, which was very fruitful and expresses the connection I always strive to establish between the architect I was raised to be and the environmental analyst I'm gradually becoming. And the latest news is that I'm actually going to close the loop. So I'm starting my new lab as an assistant professor at the Technion, where I did my bachelor. And looking back, so immediately post-graduation in 2005, I joined the biggest office firm in architecture firm in Israel and took over these two projects from preliminary sketches to execution for 7 years. The first one was a medical clinic, and the second one was an office tower. And although some environmental ideas were implemented in both, I already knew that I want to intensify my knowledge on environmental design, and getting the okay and the bursary from Simos and the staff helped my decision to move to London with my wife and one child at that time. And looking back, I can say now that the intense SED program sort of converted the way I was and still am looking at buildings and sense them. And I really also admire the triangle of knowledge between empirical measurements, simulations, predictions, and theoretical knowledge. And this is something meaningful that I took with me and I'm implementing in a way. Here we see a study my group did on the Evelyn Grace Academy by Zaha, which got a BREEAM outstanding, but revealed very surprising findings. And actually SHRAVAN, the next speaker, was an important partner here. And this was our second project in which we explored the interaction between environmental design principles and spatial expression in a colleague community in Brixton. And in my thesis, I came back to the office building typology in Tel Aviv, which I worked previously in practice and developed an environmental design strategy for the adaptation of that typology to the local climate. And actually, this project raises a lot of interest now with the pandemic. So the idea that we can think differently on an office building other than the default setting of the fully glazed office box is something very relevant, I would say, still, fortunately and unfortunately, I would say. Post-graduation, I actually came immediately to Israel and founded the Studio Adapt, which is a sort of a hub under which I led research, taught, designed, and consulted, both abroad and in some projects also in Tel Aviv. And when I returned to Israel, I also started teaching at the Technion. I got the task to co-lead the environmental module of the diploma project under a research-based design approach. And that yielded very, very interesting projects. And here we see two of them which received notable prizes. But beyond the project, during these 3 years of the course, we have these ongoing self-conscious reflections about the process of the environmental education of an architect, we call it. And this article tells part of that story. And at that time, I led research for the Israeli Ministry of Environmental Performance. So I won a grant to adapt the whole theme of zero energy buildings to the Israeli context. And while I was doing that, I realized how limited the valuable knowledge is on the correlation between urban and building morphology and environmental performance in our context, but not just. And that sparked the idea to do a PhD. And after winning the full scholarship from the DAAD, we moved to Munich in 2017. And now we were with two kids. They are now 5 and 10, 2 boys, to explore new workflows to indicate the spatial environmental trade-offs of densifying urban blocks in hot climates. And during my 4 years at the Technical University of Munich, TUM, I was mainly focused on research and teaching, so it's very far from practice. But I must say that I really love doing that. And that sort of led me to the tenure track position that I'm going to start in September in Israel. In my work, I would say that I am exploring the integration that I claim is not yet very well established between architectural thinking, which is sort of preoccupied with these sort of questions, and environmental engineering, which looks at the built environment from a different perspective. And a gap still exists despite the recent developments in design platforms, BIM, etc. So now for an introduction, I would start with with the context, which is very important for my thinking. Starting with the broader concept, I would say that there is no need to elaborate too much in this audience on the two combined challenges, the global environmental challenge on the left and the urban challenge. When we translate them into quantitative discussion, so on the environmental side, we're witnessing initiatives towards zero emissions and zero energy. And on the urban side, I would say that the paradox of the compact city is still relevant. So on the one hand, the advantages in terms of infrastructure reduction, lower envelope area, walkability, social connectivity versus the disadvantages, urban heat island, reduced access to light and air, social segregation, etc. So this discussion is also expressed on a smaller scale from a typological point of view. The same density can be achieved in several ways, and the discussion shifts from high density to sort of better density. With each typology, giving advantages and disadvantages which are important to discuss in different contexts. And coming to a very more localized context, so also in my dissertation at the AA, but also in my PhD, I came back to Israel, which is a very interesting place in terms of the context. So this small spot on the map, it can be read by hanging between European Mediterranean, looking west, and the Middle Eastern, looking east. And this combination creates a very unique situation. Climatically, there is a rather unique variety here, from coastal to mountain and desert climates, which unfortunately does not always receive proper planning attention. Nationally, Israel is already heavily urbanized, like above 90%, but it's facing a huge demographic challenge. It's actually expected to double its built environment during the next 30 years. And morphologically, the Israeli city is a typological mosaic. There's a lot of construction going on, but today most of the new construction is built following the controversial non-urban model of the towers and the park typology. And indicators are in need to inform designers and policymakers how this should be done. Also considering the new environmental goals such as zero energy, etc. And that's where I fit in. And under the overarching theme of the correlation between urban and building morphology and environmental performance, I started asking different questions. First one was regarding the contrasting impact of the sun, which cannot be avoided, as Le Corbusier drew nicely. On the one hand, we want to spread out buildings to allow for passive heating, energy production, and daylight. On the other hand, we want to increase self-shading to block undesirable solar gains, reduce glare, and increase density. So how can we reach an improved urban solar trade-off in a dense fabric? That was one of my first questions. And next, I started mapping the criteria for environmental performance, mapped the indicators with which we quantify that performance, and the methods and tools which investigate the correlation between form and environmental performance. And at that point, I asked a question I had long before I started my PhD: which typology will yield the best environmental performance, and how far can we densify without compromising it? And here there is an evolution of the reference point from focusing on energy efficiency only. Unfortunately, the Israeli Green Building Code stops somewhere here, to energy balance between demand and supply, when the world is already talking about regeneration, where the enhancement of the environment starts to be the name of the game. It's also reflected in the wide range of SDGs, where energy is considered together with other indicators. And from a deep understanding of the local context, I knew how far we are from achieving high environmental performance in the Israeli built environment. So we are far from fulfilling our solar potential and from matching energy supply and demand. And on the environmental quality side, only small consideration is given to the thermal comfort of the man on the street or the visual quality in buildings. Clearly, the morphological parameters of building designs directly influence all of the above. So help changing that was a strong motivation for me, a mission, if you will. And thinking about it, I also immediately realized that in urban environmental evaluation, one tool might not be enough, but also that there are a lot of tools out there. So the effective integration of tools to find the best trade-offs between environmental considerations quickly became my focus. So from delving into the state of the art and understanding the local context, the aim of the study of my PhD emerged, establishing a parametric workflow to deliver reliable indication for several environmental performance metrics towards an improved performance starting point. And in my research, I decided to focus on these 4 criteria, which express the balance between energy considerations and the environmental quality. From that point, my methodology quickly emerged, and the analytical parametric workflow was set in Grasshopper, in which each design input or geometrical component, as we see on the figure, is automatically channeled to different environmental calculation modules. And this is how it works under the hood. So relevant data is seamlessly and selectively channeled to validated simulation engines. The outputs are managed and calculated according to selected metrics, and the results are then visualized for comparison or used for optimization. And this workflow can be easily adapted, include more KPIs, other scales, etc. And in that way, a large set of results is gathered for various design alternatives, and the result can be visually analyzed to select the best combination in terms of evaluating several environmental criteria together. So my research moved modularly. Each segment added another aspect or environmental criteria. It was published separately. This was a publication-based dissertation. The fifth one was not included, but it closes the loop with optimization. I now very quickly go over these phases just to show you the idea. So the first segment focused on 5 typical typologies in Israel and tested the impact of both building scale and urban scale design parameters on both energy balance and daylight performance. The graphs we see here actually tells us for the first time in the context of Tel Aviv how far we are from achieving zero energy in different density and typology scenarios. So it's actually very useful. The second segment tests the opportunity to use microclimatic outputs gathered around a building to create a new weather file for the energy simulation. And by that include microclimatic weather data in energy simulation workflows, which were tested here for 3 typologies. The third segment looked at an actual case study in Tel Aviv, in which the architects were looking at 4 different typologies intuitively for a very large district. So they said, the wind might come from here, the sun could come from here, maybe this one is better than the other. So I took these 4 typologies and used my workflow to indicate which of these typologies would be favorable and in which configurations, taking also outdoor-thermal comfort as a consideration aside daylight and energy balance. The fourth segment of my research was done in collaboration with Cornell. They created this great cylindrical analytical tool, Edit3D, that lets you simulate wind patterns on an annual scale using OpenFOAM. So this allows to start analyzing and looking at the annual outdoor thermal comfort, which we did not do until that innovation, and we did it. I did it here with them for the same 5 typologies. So for the first time, we can get these annual outdoor thermal comfort plots for different typologies, and in this case, also compare different climates towards a more localized typological decision making. And the last segment I'm going to show you, I know it's a lot of numbers and graphs compared to the very, very nice images we've seen before, is about the integration of optimization into my workflow. And it's an ongoing collaboration with Dr. Thomas Wortman. I don't know if you know him. He created the Opossum optimization plugin for Grasshopper from Stuttgart, in which in this study, I upscaled my workflow to 12 typologies and a larger district. So at this scale, if you look at the combinations, the number of design alternatives is too overwhelming to be calculated with parametric methods. It will take forever. So in this study, we highlighted simplified metrics, which can be used for rapid optimization of the larger districts. So I already had the chance to test this workflow in teaching, such as we did here in the studio. We gave on Tirana as part of my work at TUM. This is an urban setting with huge development contrast between shiny architecture and deprived areas, which is undergoing massive development and redevelopment that requires thinking. And with some of the projects, my workflow could help inform the strategies. So it was really insightful. And right before the Corona, I had another opportunity to visit Copenhagen and run a workflow at KDK on some parts of my workflow in the Masters of Architecture and Extreme Environments. And we actually won a grant based also on this workshop for one idea, one of Amy Desert that works for Big Now, focusing on annual environmental design, data visualization. We are working on a new plugin, which will be open source, that will help provide a new reading of the data in different spatial and temporal ways. Okay, we are accumulating all these layers of data. We need to start curating them somehow. Looking forward, I will briefly show some ideas which are currently cooking. So I would say that the research paths forward are mostly driven from the limitation I encountered in my PhD. I would say that integrating vegetation is a very important step forward, validating my workflow, especially the MRT calculation, to substantial limitations I aim to work on. The adaptive open-ended nature of Grasshopper allow for many new directions and additions to my workflow, such as LCA, mobility, more KPIs. So I will now very briefly introduce one ongoing research direction I'm currently working on together with Professor Gedi Capelotto from the Technion, Dr. Francesco De Luca, and Professor Thomas Wortman. We are developing an application of my workflow for solar envelopes. And we see these cool pixelated designs which claim to work with the sun, right? More and more. Also at the urban scale. But I always felt that more science should come into these ideas. So we offer this bottom-up approach for solar envelopes based on additive voxelization method, by which we create multiple solar-driven massing alternatives, which are generated and analyzed using a series of simplified metrics I have previously developed, and then we can screen them using optimization workflow or using visual optimization, as you see. So in contrast to the rigid solar envelopes, which sort of shows us the maximum potential that we know, we have a variety of solar-driven design solutions which represent different trade-offs between different considerations associated with solar exposure and shading, which we then can choose from. And to conclude, although I focused here at the urban scale mostly, it's hard to separate between the other scales, and the synergy between them is extremely important, also to achieve a reliable and meaningful results. And my new lab at the Technion, in my new lab, I will probably create an extension to my ongoing quest to find the integration of environmental performance into architectural design, cross-scale and cross-contextual way. So I hope you stay tuned. And that brings me back to the dialogue I have between the architect and the engineer. And if we ask what's cool, we get different answers, and share that although smart and artificial are becoming part of what we do, human intuition and touch are here to stay. And I really admire the attitude and the approach of Simos to make us all such like environmental design Jedi warriors, sensing things. But I still think we have to think about the link between these two guys. So hopefully we can do something together on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Great stuff. Characteristically overambitious, maybe, but great stuff. I can give years and years of research. But I think it is a very interesting possibility of good collaboration with CHANASIT. You know, and his take at the same actually problem from the practitioner's viewpoint. Yeah, I mean that's one of the other ideas of this engagement, to bring together the various streams of work that our alumni are engaged in. Okay, well, we'll come back to this, hopefully with some discussion in a minute. So let's continue with SHRAVAN. Are you connected? Yeah?
Yes, Simos, just give me a minute and I'm through.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Yeah.
You just need to full screen now.
Yes, got it. Can you see this? Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Firstly, Simos, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, AASED, and more importantly, this is a great opportunity for us to show what we have learned and where we are right now, and what our plans next are. And Jonathan and CHANASIT, great stuff. Jonathan, as always, not disappointing, and I think Simos put it the right way. Ambitious, and he's super. Just 1 second. Yeah. Our firm is called EnviArch Studio. It started. It was founded by Megha, Nanaya, and me. Megha is also an AASED product. She and Jonathan were both MSc graduates. Over the last 5 years, we've done a fair amount of small projects put together. For this presentation, I would specifically like to talk about three. I would like to separate them into 3 segments: the 2014 to 2017 space, the 2018 to 2020, and then what about 21 onwards. In those, I've picked 3 projects which I would like to explain, and they have, and I'm not explaining them due to any size, scale, or typology. But well, the typology is the same. I'm explaining 3 homes, but they all are special in its own way. So the first one is called the Sink House. The second one is an N9 courtyard and our offices. And the third one is between the mango trees. So talking about the Sink House, this was designed, this was one of our first projects. We started designing this in 2015 up until 2016 when we delivered the project. The story goes like this, that we were taken to the site by the clients, and the first thing that we saw on site were these sinks. So basically, to give you a history, Konapa is a limestone, a black limestone, which is found in the southern part of India. 5 of such pieces are put together and they're sold as sinks. And they're very robust, and of course they're very strong, and they're black in color. The piece of land on which we were building previously belonged to somebody who used to manufacture these sinks. When he sold the property, he left all those sinks and went away. We found about 200 of these sinks. Since it was our first project, we thought, why not have some fun? Picked up a couple of them, got them tested for strength, stability, and what are the options you can do. And we found that they were quite strong. Then, of course, we started checking the options. How do we place them, one on top of the other, one inside, one outside? And of course, we were looking at some sort of a wall which is self-shading. And I think that's where the SED part of us kicks in. So now we are looking at 3 options. We selected option 1 and we selected option 2. Drew up a very simple sketch as to how the farm, or rather how the house is going to work. You're going to have a corridor. You're going to have the space inside, and you're going to have, and the whole structure is going to be designed around a courtyard. So this was a very simple plan that came about. But what was interesting is the use of these sinks as main structural elements, which means that the whole roof was placed on top of these sinks. It came about something like this, where you have your superstructure, which is sitting on top of these humble stone sinks. What was interesting is and I would like to thank the client, because this is probably the first time they were put together like this as building elements. And it was, the clients who were good friends of ours also. They gave us the competence to push this through as an idea and into execution. One of the things that we as a firm strongly believe in is the use of local materials. Here you see the use of cement, stained cement, which is used as a finishing material, which is now so you've got multiple colors, and then this is green in color, and that's the farm that comes together. That's the whole thing. Now, the most interesting thing on this was, of course, and this is something that I will come back right at the end of the presentation as well, hopefully, and I'll try and explain why this project was put here and why this is so important to us. But yeah, it was built around the courtyard, a very simple, humble home that was built for a family of 3, overlooking the hills and the mountains. One of the criteria here was that all the materials that we had to source was sourced within a 50-kilometer radius. So the stones that you see, which are put in the courtyard right now, are actually the fencing poles, which we picked out from the periphery, and we use them in the courtyard, and so on and so forth. The second project that I would like to talk about is called the N9 Courtyard EA plus VA offices. This is personally very, very important to us, of course, because it is our own house and our office. A little brief background into this is basically how we would like to categorize this project. Is we're trying to redefine, what a courtyard means, and our one of our principal guiding factors in the firm has also been the idea of us staying local and being fairly a traditional approach in terms of what a courtyard means and where it can be integrated. Because of course it makes a lot of sense in the tropical climate that we are in. So the office, it's a small site. It's a very small site. It's about 3,000 square feet, 300 square meter site in a very dense locality. We had a large road in front, a large road which in Bangalore also means a lot of traffic, a lot of noise, which meant that we could probably only get sunlight from that source or that orientation, but not really bring in a lot of dust and noise which accompany it. So this is what we were permitted to build. In that we had segregated one part of it as commercial offices, and the top 2 floors were handed to us to build what we wanted to build. So I'll start off with what our office is. It's a open plan office. Right at the beginning is where all the public part happens, where you have clients, you have vendors coming in, and then far back is where you have the studio and our private spaces. We wanted to bring in a lot of light coming into the space. Like I explained before, we as a firm would like to experiment a lot with stained cement and stained concretes. So here you can see the use of green and grays as stained cement options. And of course, being in a tropical climate, which meant that we have good amount of wood at our disposal. So we would love to use that as a material. So these 3 or 4 elements came together, defining our space. So this is where I'm currently working out of. And we believe that we wanted to open out the complete environment and allow as long as the windows are shaded and we had rain protection. I thought we were safe. So one of the things that I think right after SCD, one of the things that we picked on was we did not dwell a lot into analysis, and we did not go too much into numerical data, but we just believe that if you're able to keep these 3-4 checklists, and as far as shading, as far as ventilation, as far as you're allowing night ventilation, as far as you're allowing cross ventilation, these are and you're bringing in a lot of light, reflected light, of course, you are fairly safe. So bringing in techniques like lures or stuff like that is something that we have integrated quite a lot in the office. So the whole facade as such opens out. It is being shaded from the top, so you have no direct light coming into the space, but at the same time it brings in a lot of breeze. In continuation with the same, we have the upper floor, which is the N9 courtyard. So the idea here was very simple. We have divided the living, the courtyard, and the sleeping spaces. So that is what our initial sketches were, which then get reflected into this, which is so at the bottom of the section you see our office, and at the top you see the living and the dining room. Right at the center there is the courtyard, and on the left hand side you have the 2 bedrooms that we've got for ourselves. So in some sense, the courtyard became the spine of the house. Everything revolved around the courtyard. The living room, naturally, so like I was explaining earlier, we were abutting a major arterial road in Bangalore, which meant we couldn't open the windows, or rather we didn't want to open the windows there. We were getting a lot of light from there, but obviously all our ventilation, everything happened through the courtyard, which was secluded and isolated. Of course, this courtyard is open to sky. So you see the dining, which flows onto the courtyard. You have the kitchen, which flows to the courtyard. You have the bedroom, which flows onto the courtyard. And then the courtyard became central to every activity of ours. Then you had the bedrooms on the top and a terrace for us to entertain. So this is something which is showing how we would like to use the space, and we have been mapping our how we have used the house, and in all our mapping activities we have realized that from every space, whenever either we have guests or don't have guests, or if we are just alone at home, the courtyard is something that always gets used. I wouldn't want to how do you say, put in a lot of technical details, but we have been doing some data analysis, or rather we have put in some data loggers to read what is the kind of temperature it's been, what are the temperature graphs and all of those. So I think sometime I haven't put this down in this presentation, but I would love to put those in detail and explain them. But yeah. So this is how the courtyard starts to look. It has a water body which brings the ambient temperature down. This is the living room, and the living and the dining and then open out into the courtyard. Onto this side, you see the connection between the dining and onto the courtyard, and then the kitchen which flows onto the courtyard. A lot of light coming into the toilets, the bedroom on the top. In all these, what you see is one consistent factor, that is just the use of 2 materials, which is we've used wood and we have used stained cement into different colors. That flows across the house, be it walls, be it flooring, it's all the same. Onto the third project, and this is the project that we are currently executing. This was, it's basically the idea of staying local and using So the project is a farmhouse again. This is set about 100 kilometers from Bangalore. The exciting part, or rather the challenge in the project, was the fact that the client wanted us to use bricks which are from a 50 kilometer radius, which meant that all the materials had to come in within this 50 kilometer radius. That was exciting because we figured that there was a brick kiln which was right next to our site. So we started testing bricks and we started using the same bricks. So in terms of, so if your question is where is the sustainability coming across, it's basically we're trying to build local. We are trying to use things which are locally available, and we are trying to keep it as close to vernacular design, or as close to traditionally how it was done 100 years ago. We're trying to replicate the same around here. So the challenge was that this was in a mango orchard. This site was given to us, and we had to snuggle this house in between these mango trees. And quite naturally, a courtyard developed, in all of this. So that formed into, so using the bricks as a feature, using again wood and exposed and concrete as the other elements that come in. This is something that we are now working on, and hopefully in the next 1 year we should be able to finish this project. So the courtyard is something that all of us are looking forward to, because it's a double height courtyard, it's an open to sky courtyard, and we are now trying to study the effect of this courtyard in a larger setting. So this is a project that the office is looking forward to, and this is basically a section through the project which shows the double height, and we're trying to work with volumes to figure out how do you integrate volume into the connection between the outside and the inside, trying to fuse that threshold and allowing transfer of heat or of air in a seamless manner, at the same time giving the occupants the privacy that they need. So this is the section through the courtyard, and the previous one was a section through the longer part of the house. We're trying to do different types of bricks along in the same project to figure how the whole thing is going to come about. And I think the reason I would like to bring the whole presentation together is actually in these 3 or 4 slides that I have coming up. So for one of our projects, the client wanted us to use reclaimed materials, and that got a debate started in our office, saying that we had been to one of these person who's selling reclaimed either wood, furniture, or materials, and the thing that struck us is that houses in Chettinad is in the southern part of India. Houses in Chettinad were bought down, and every single component of that house was put for sale. And that got us thinking that isn't this true sustainability, where you're talking about a house which is built over 100 years ago, it's bought down, and now it has new owners, which means that there's literally very less energy which is spent in putting it up together, as opposed to everything being new and and that is something that we have tried to do in some of our projects. So on the left hand side is an ongoing project where we are trying to figure how do you put together stones in a dry manner, which meant that there is very less cement as possible. The sinks on the right in the first project, which was put together in complete dry construction. And that gets us thinking that why shouldn't we look at water efficient building methods? And this is something that we as a firm are thinking about seriously. And we are looking at regional identity. This is a project that we had completed 2 years back. The fun part about this project is the client was a steel baron, which meant that he had a lot of steel to dispose of on his building. One of the criteria, as he had told us, was the whole building needs to be in steel. And yes, so we were able to bring in our passive strategies of shading and the idea of a double roof, the idea of how do you bring about a coherent kind of an environment, and this is something that we did try. This is something now this is an ongoing project. It's basically a combination of passive strategies, the idea of jalis coming about, and regional identity and material reinterpretation. We're trying to walk away from the general or the usual representation of how a new hospital should be, in all glass and steel and all of that. We're just trying to reinterpret that, and that is something that we are currently looking into. And I think the last thing that I would like to talk about is we would like to move away from conventional construction methods through all these material reinterpretations that in a very small manner we have been trying to actively do. And I think, and hopefully in our small ways, we'll be able to reinterpret, the whole term of sustainability in some sense. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, SHRAVAN. Thank you for very good projects and very worthwhile synthesis between the original and the traditional. And I think there is a very strong stream of research that I think you have embarked on, of reclaiming value from stuff that has been left out as useless, and making it useful, valuable, and bringing in that its traditional value as well. So now it would be nice to be able to have some discussion. I always say that, and then when I ask the audience in a meeting like this to engage in some discussion, it's really very difficult. And recently I said, well, I will no longer ask anybody to say anything, maybe even accept the silence that the medium somehow, likes to create, accept the silence. And hope that somehow telepathically, people will engage. But anyhow, I think that there is so much to say about the potential connections between your three presentations in both what they have achieved and in their ambitions for the future, and how I guess they could come together in collaborative ventures. I already want to offer collaborations because I can see them, and so it would be nice to explore that. Now, I had much admired CHANASIT's image that he showed in his first slide. It's a beautiful slide of the building, one of the buildings, or two of the buildings that he had designed as part of that low-cost community. But I hadn't actually had the opportunity to see the absolutely beautiful drawings that your office is doing. It's magnificent in terms of clarity. The architectural quality is already in the drawing very much, and then pursued in the making. Here we have the ultimate architectural dream. which can then be informed by, Jonathan will ask, okay, what combination would you like? A range of options on which to work. And then SHRAVAN will bring elements that can be brought into it that come from a continuing line, so that stuff is not lost but reclaimed and made valuable again. So there was also that aspect, that question, research question about the courtyard, the role, bringing back the role of the courtyard and exploring it. The courtyard at the level of the individual building, as distinct from the very large courtyards of large buildings. Anyhow, so enough from me. Maybe you want to ask questions of each other, which would be very nice, and also of the field. I mean, which way? Where are we going? I think Jonathan explored that, and he has a plan for that. You all have plans for the future. I mean, the future is good, is it?
No, I think it's a really good point to start understanding and talking about the design workflow, because the design process is in a way changing anyway without us talking about the environmental aspects in it. But still, with this change of the design process to the digital workflow, there are a lot of opportunities and also challenges for our field. And I'm sure you see also when I look at some of the works coming out of the program, the latest works, I see a change. There is a shift. There is a sort of, I would say there is a shift in everything. Also, what is the benchmark? The standards are changing also, As I showed, there is an evolution. Energy efficiency, then we start balancing energy, then we start talking about regeneration. So what is the environmental criteria? We're looking at construction methods like SHRAVAN showed. When I look at the courtyard, should I look at comfort? Maybe I can simulate, used to talk about PET, but maybe now we can talk about other things because, all the time also the tools are becoming more and more advanced that they will allow designers or supposedly allow designers to get indications. And this is very interesting for me to start understanding what is more important. Because in a way, we can create all these kind of very sophisticated calculations, but I can say something about courtyards in my research, because in the end of the day, I looked at different typologies. And this was beautiful because also my professor, Thomas Auer, is from Transolar. Is an engineer coming from this heavy duty, sophisticated mechanical part. But in the end of the day, what we discovered is that the courtyard, the vernacular rationale of going for the courtyard in my climate is still justified when we also add other things like autothermal comfort, when we add energy generation that were not present that time. And this is amazing. So this wisdom, this shift between something very sophisticated and highly technological and something something eternal, like a timeless wisdom, is still something I would say that is still a very important discussion.
Absolutely. I think the experience, I think what we have found, for example, with our building studies, the buildings that we study every year in term one, usually London buildings. But this year, there weren't London buildings because the students were not in London. So there were wherever you are buildings. And it was quite interesting to be able just from the week one of the year for our students to be able to comprehend, compare, and assess buildings that were all over the world, in different climates at the time at which different climatic conditions. There's quite a lesson. But I think something we shouldn't lose. In fact, I would encourage to retain, and that's why I mentioned the building studies, is the experience. So that, once one is able to rationalize on the experience, the way the CHANASIT describe it, for example, that connection with the outside, that bringing the nature inside, and the demonstration that it had happened. So it wasn't just a drawing, but a reality. And then the next step would be to have the experience of having experienced it the way that he designed it, and see whether it generates the kind of sentiments yes, the words escape me at the right moment when they're needed, and the students are laughing at me there. I can see them from that upper corner. But I think it is this kind of thing that the discussion on well-being has brought in. Something that I often call, so as not to make it too dramatic, a good environment. The good environment that is described with lots of numbers, several layers of numbers, but there is also several additional layers that are not describable by numbers or by this kind of numbers. That somehow we want to be able to learn from experience, and then being able to transmit that experience.
Well, I really liked what SHRAVAN showed. In the end of the day, is the mango tree factor. How can you quantify?
Precisely. But I think, CHANASIT, you wanted to say something on this.
Yes, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Can you repeat the question again? My internet is unstable, so.
Well, I was making some points about the quality of your drawings, and then the quality of the buildings themselves is extremely high, and then your description of the integration of nature inside the building, and the framing of the connections, and was saying that this is a value, this is something, an experience that it's impossible to translate into numbers or to generate from the numbers. Either having experienced it to make it into, well, this is the equation that describes it, or you have the equation and then generating it just out of the equations, and that's something unique. And maybe that is also good in the sense that when one becomes a good architect, then there is something, a je ne sais quoi, that was not a technical thing. It involves technical things, but it wasn't. But it wasn't just a product of. Now, can I ask our audience, our students, our current students, especially the ones who are hiding in the studio at the AA, I can see 5 of them, what they think about the presentations that were given and how they paint the future for you. What did I say? Expect silence. Yeah.
Wait, can you hear me? I'm gonna get closer. Maybe that way you can hear me better. Hi, thank you for the presentations. Actually, they were very interesting and inspiring, because we always think that we're going to graduate and probably we hope to be able to do what we're doing in postgrad. But we know that we have these limits regarding when we have to get employed and the limitations from the clients and from the office and everything, and we have to work under someone. So it's very inspiring to see that you guys are actually doing something that really is SED and really is changing the way we think about architecture, and which we want to do. I think I speak for yeah, which we want to do, and I think it's really nice to see that it's not too far out there. So thank you for that.
Well put, Gabi. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
Any other?
If no more students contribute, may I take a minute?
Yes, please, yeah.
Thank you. First of all, thank you all the presenters. It was great to see how different paths one can take from this great course. And actually, I said I was in Greece, but I'm based in Houston, Texas, and you may probably imagine, or you may imagine how hard it is to speak about energy there. Energy is cheap, everybody's as rich, is like, you know, the oil capital of the world and all that. So that shift of the conversation to experience well-being, but also I will add to that resilience, which, you know, Houston experienced an outage from freeze, surprisingly. That devastated the city for a few weeks. Flooding is an issue, hurricanes are issues. And if you don't have as simple as operable windows, you cannot survive. So sometimes simple things like that as contributors to resilience can be highlighted. One thing that I also noticed in at least the two presenters, CHANASIT and SHRAVAN, but also Jonathan probably in his previous career, is that being the same person, designer, and kind of the analytical mind behind it is very important. And from my personal experience, I have struggled a little bit both in the industry and in the academia to merge the two. And I think that participating in this program makes it exceptional because of that. Back to that was just thoughts through the conversation, but I had a question for SHRAVAN. Whether he experienced any pushback from construction, actually, from the construction part of the project, having had a short experience in Uganda, building a free-running building, totally passive, and so on, you would see that people here have adapted so much to Western modern structural typical methods, and that they didn't want to go back to the prototypical ones or to the vernacular ones because they didn't know them anymore. And how hard it is to bridge these, and whether you experience any pushback from that.
Thank you. So one thing that the pandemic has done now is teach people, or rather show them a mirror to where they're living. And what I mean by that is they're now able to look at their environment more closely. Because if you look at what our previous lives were, we would, get up early in the morning, go to the office, stay in the office for the longest hours. So you would want a very nice office, a sustainable office, an office with a lot of light and all of that. And then now you come back to your home and sleep. And that is pretty much what the life here is. But if you look at what the pandemic has done, it's put you back in your home. And now you're at home wondering, oh God, I'm not getting enough ventilation. Oh God, I'm not getting enough light, and so on and so forth. Now, yes, it's bound to happen to everyone. And it predominantly happens here, where you're looking at buildings in the West and you're saying, hey, this is what represents a typology of building. And am I right in gauging your question, whether the imagery is what people look out for and not really what, or rather the skin is what people look out for and not really what happens inside. Am I gauging the question right?
Sure, and specifically for construction methods that they don't know anymore, that used to be the norm a while ago.
So a method that we use is that we try and educate the clients as much as we can, because one of the advantages of reusing any material is that it's often cheaper than buying something new. So then you've already got a plus, which means that I'm going to save money. And there are very specific materials like this that you can pick out in construction, which is wood, stone. These are materials that you can readily reuse. Wood, for example, the older the wood, the better it is in terms of weathering, in terms of the way it can be molded and shaped. So these are things that we can readily sell, or rather we can readily integrate into a project. But I think, like everyone else, there are places and spaces where we have to compromise and say, okay, let's buy something new and at least, try and do our best in whatever little way we can.
So I was saying that next week we have 5 of our alumni coming back. Alexandra Andone, who is with PRP Architects in London. Annelies de Koff, who's based in Amsterdam, Holland. Cara Multeri is with the Renzo Piano Building Workshop in Genova. Rawan Kubrosi is at the American University of Madaba in Amman, Jordan. And Pierluigi Turco, who is with SOM Architects in London. And I hope that all of you will be back. So thank you so much yet again, CHANASIT, Jonathan, SHRAVAN, fantastic presentations. Let's exchange emails for possible collaboration. Yeah, and thank you, although not speaking so much, still being there and paying attention and learning. Bye for now.
Thank you very much, Simos.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.